The differences between transverse and longitudinal engines. Before we get started, we have some exciting news. If you're a fan of Formula 1, racing and much more, then check out our new YouTube channel, WTF1. And to celebrate, we're giving away an awesome bundle of Car Throttle and WTF1 snapbacks, t-shirts and keychains to 5 new lucky subscribers. To be in with a chance of winning, all you need to do is click the I in the top right corner, head over to WTF1 and hit that subscribe button. The lucky random winners will be announced in next week's video. Now, let's do this! Transverse engine setups dominate the small car market, while longitudinal powertrains are used more for performance cars. So how do they compare to each other, and what are the pros and cons of each? Transverse engines. Transverse engines are mounted perpendicularly to the direction of travel, lying horizontally in the engine bay. This setup is predominantly used in front-engine, front-wheel drive vehicles where the transmission is fixed to the side of the engine block, along with an off-center differential for a simple insertion of the drive shafts through CV joints. Transverse engines have become the norm in smaller mass-production cars, with a V6 usually being the largest layout that can be mounted in this way, although Transverse V8 powered cars do exist, including the Northstar engined Cadillac DeVille. The main reason for the Transverse engine's popularity is because it frees up space elsewhere in the chassis. In city cars, a Transverse engine allows for more room in the interior, and the lack of a central tunnel needed for the transmission and prop shaft means that the floor can be flatter to maximize passenger comfort and space. Cars with Transverse engines also tend to be lighter, which is good for fuel economy and ease of driving. In terms of driving dynamics, a front-mounted Transverse engine places the majority of the car's weight over the front wheels. In a front-wheel drive car, this gives maximum traction to the driven wheels, which is good for acceleration and for tackling slippery surfaces. The lack of drivetrain components needed also means that overall weight and manufacturing costs are reduced, generally making these cars less expensive to buy. Unfortunately, Transverse engine layouts do have their limitations. Torque steer in cars with big power is their greatest enemy, as this is induced by the difference in driveshaft length that produce differences in torsional stiffness. This problem has been negated by engineers through various ways. Transverse engines are also restricted in terms of their displacement and potential power output because of the limited horizontal space in a front-wheel drive front-engine car. And we also can't ignore the fact that front-engine front-wheel drive cars can't throttle through corners quite like this. Longitudinal engines. Longitudinal engines are generally used in rear-wheel drive setups. These engines are mounted down the center line of the vehicle, forming a straight path from the crankshaft to the transmission, prop shaft, and the rear differential. For people who simply use cars as a means of getting from point A to point B, things don't really work in favor of longitudinal engines. In engineering terms, the transmission of rotational energy from the crankshaft is less efficient than a transverse engine, as a rotation has to change direction by 90 degrees via a differential to drive the wheels. Cabin space can also be hindered through the long engine effectively pushing the dashboard back, and through the transmission tunnel running down the center of the car. Then there's the fact that cars with longitudinal setups tend to be heavier, less fuel efficient, and more expensive to buy and run. But in defense of a longitudinal setup, they generally feature better turning circles and are also easier to work on thanks to less stuff in the engine bay getting in the way. The front to rear weight distribution of the car will also be preferable to a transverse orientation where mass is accumulated at the front of the chassis. This makes a car more predictable and also allows manufacturers to implement complex all-wheel drive systems using torsion differentials and viscous couplings directly down the line from the transmission. In terms of modifications, a longitudinal engine car also allows plenty of scope for engine swaps. From an inline-four to a V6, V8 and above, the orientation of the engine block normally gives enough space for a larger power plant, and the lack of drive shafts up front adds to the simplicity in comparison to a transverse swap. The argument of transverse versus longitudinal really boils down to the application. Cars that aren't short of or don't prioritize interior space, like saloons and sports cars, can easily accommodate a longitudinal setup to take advantage of a large, powerful engine. Meanwhile, the majority of hatchbacks will go for the compact transverse option and are all the better for it. Both do their jobs extremely well, and in the world of impending EVs, long may this argument continue. Which engine layout do you prefer? Let us know your thoughts below, and don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons for more videos like this. In today's episode, I'm going to be putting new wheels and tyres onto my IS200 Sport to see how much faster I can make it. So they're 17s, these are 16s. So we're going down a size, but it's going to look epic.